The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city streets as Andre finished packing up his debate team materials. He glanced at his watch and sighed. If he hurried, he could still catch the 5:30 bus and make it home in time for dinner. With his grandmother, who had been preparing his favorite meal all day, Andre tucked his debate notes into his backpack, said goodbye to his teammates, and jogged toward the bus stop. The sky had begun to darken with heavy clouds, promising the rain that had been forecast all day. He pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders and quickened his pace. When the number 42 bus pulled up to the curb, Andre felt a wave of relief. He'd made it just in time. He climbed the steps, offering a polite smile to the driver, an older man with deep-set eyes and a permanent frown etched into his weathered face. The name badge pinned to his uniform read, Raymond. "Evening," Andre said, reaching for his bus pass. He'd been using the same pass all school year without issue, sliding it through the reader before finding a seat, usually near the middle of the bus where he could look out the window and collect his thoughts after a long day. But today something was different. The card reader flashed red instead of the usual green. Andre tried again, careful to slide the card at the right speed. "Machine's not reading it," Raymond said, his voice flat and cold. "Sorry about that," Andre replied, already reaching for his wallet. "I can pay cash instead. I've got exact change." Raymond didn't respond, just stared straight ahead as if Andre hadn't spoken. The bus was half full, and a few passengers looked up from their phones, curious about the delay. "Excuse me," Andre said, a little louder this time. "I said I can pay cash." He held out $3 bills, more than enough for the standard fare. Raymond finally turned to look at him, but there was something in his eyes that made Andre take a small step back. It wasn't just annoyance. There was something harder there, something that made the hair on the back of Andre's neck stand up. "Pass doesn't work, you don't ride," Raymond said. Andre blinked in confusion. "But I'm offering to pay the fare. I ride this route 3 times a week, and when the machine acts up, the other drivers just take cash." A woman sitting near the front nodded in agreement. "That's right. Terry always does." Raymond's jaw tightened. "I'm not Terry, am I?" He looked Andre up and down, his gaze lingering on Andre's debate team hoodie from the predominantly black high school across town. "And I make the rules on my bus." The tension in the air was palpable now. Andre felt his heartbeat quicken, but he kept his voice steady. His debate coach had always emphasized staying calm under pressure. "Sir, I don't understand the problem. I'm just trying to get home before this storm hits." As if on cue, a low rumble of thunder sounded in the distance. The first few raindrops began to spatter against the windshield. "The problem," Raymond said, his voice rising, "is that some people think they're entitled to special treatment." He gestured to the line forming behind Andre. "You're holding up my route." "I'm not asking for special treatment," Andre replied, struggling to keep his voice level. "I'm just trying to pay my fare like everyone else." An older gentleman standing behind Andre spoke up. "Come on, driver, the kid's got the money right there. What's the holdup?" Raymond's face darkened. "You want to get involved? You can get off my bus, too." The older man raised his hands in surrender and stepped back. Andre felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. This wasn't just about a malfunctioning bus pass. He'd encountered this kind of treatment before, the unnecessary obstacles, the different set of rules that seemed to apply only to him. "Look," Andre said, trying one more time. "I'm a regular on this route. Ask anyone, I've never caused any trouble. It's starting to rain and I just need to get home." He still held out the money, hoping for reason to prevail. Instead, Raymond stood up, towering over Andre. "I told you. No working pass, no ride. Now get off my bus before I call dispatch." The rain was coming down harder now. Through the windows, Andre could see it bouncing off the sidewalk. His grandmother's house was nearly 4 miles away. "This isn't right," Andre said quietly, more to himself than to Raymond. That was when Raymond snapped. "Right? I'll tell you what's not right. You questioning my authority on my bus." He stepped forward, invading Andre's personal space. Andre instinctively backed up, but Raymond kept coming. Before Andre could react, Raymond had placed both hands on his chest and shoved him, hard. The force sent Andre stumbling backward down the steps. He tried to catch himself but lost his footing on the wet bottom step. He landed hard on the sidewalk, his backpack spilling open, debate notes and textbooks scattering across the wet pavement. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Andre sat there stunned, the rain soaking through his clothes. A sharp pain radiated from his wrist where he'd tried to break his fall. Inside the bus, there was a collective gasp. A woman near the front stood up, phone in hand, looking horrified. "Did you just put your hands on that boy?" she demanded, her voice carrying through the open door. Raymond ignored her, reaching for the door control. "Find another way home," he said to Andre, and the doors hissed shut. Through the windows, Andre could see several passengers arguing with Raymond, their faces animated with anger and disbelief. But the bus pulled away from the curb, leaving Andre sitting on the wet sidewalk in a neighborhood he didn't know well, rain pouring down on his scattered belongings. His hands trembled as he gathered his soggy notes and books. The debate tournament, outline he'd spent hours perfecting, was now a bleeding mess of blue ink. His phone had skidded several feet away and he crawled over to retrieve it, ignoring the throbbing in his wrist. An elderly woman with a floral umbrella approached from the bus shelter. "You all right, honey?" she asked, holding the umbrella over him. "I saw what happened. That wasn't right, not right at all." Andre couldn't speak for a moment. The shock was giving way to a mixture of anger and humiliation that clogged his throat. He'd done nothing wrong. Nothing at all. "I'm okay," he finally managed, though he wasn't sure if that was true. He stood up, wincing at the pain in his wrist and the scrape on his palm. "Thank you. That man had no cause to treat you that way," the woman continued, helping him gather the last of his papers. "I've been riding these buses for 30 years and I've never seen such a thing." Andre nodded, unable to find the right words. How could he explain that while this particular incident might have been shocking to her, it wasn't entirely surprising to him? That sometimes the world showed its teeth in these moments, quick and sharp and impossible to prepare for. "Do you need to call someone?" the woman asked. "You shouldn't be out in this weather with a hurt wrist." The rain was coming down in sheets now. Andre checked his phone, thankfully still working despite its fall to the pavement. "I'll call my grandma," he said. "But I don't even know exactly where I am." The woman pointed to a street sign. "We're at Oakwood and 18th. There's a cafe just down the block where you can wait inside." Andre thanked her again and started to dial his grandmother's number, but his finger hovered over the call button. She would be upset, not at him, but at the situation, and he hated to worry her. She had enough on her plate already. The elderly woman was still watching him with concern. "What's your name, young man?" "Andre," he replied. "Andre Wilson." "Well, Andre Wilson, my name is Ms. Beatrice, and I want you to know that I saw everything. Every single thing." She pulled a business card from her purse. "I volunteer at the community center. If you need a witness to what happened here today, you call that number." Andre took the card, oddly touched by this stranger's kindness in the midst of what had just happened. "Thank you, Ms. Beatrice." As he finally pressed the call button to reach his grandmother, Andre looked back in the direction the bus had gone. In his 16 years, he'd learned that the world wasn't always fair, that sometimes people looked at you and made assumptions that had nothing to do with who you really were. But he'd also learned something else, that those moments didn't define him. What defined him was what he did next. His grandmother answered on the third ring. "Andre, where are you, baby? Dinner's almost ready." Andre took a deep breath. "Grandma," he said, "something happened on the bus today. I'm okay, but I'm going to be late, and I think we need to make a phone call to the transit authority." As he explained the situation, standing in the pouring rain under Ms. Beatrice's umbrella, Andre had no way of knowing that this moment, painful and unjust as it was, would set in motion events that would change not only his life but the lives of many others in ways no one could have predicted. Ms. Beatrice held her floral umbrella steady over Andre as they hurried through the rain toward the small cafe she had mentioned. The downpour had intensified, turning the streets into rushing streams and drowning out the sounds of traffic. By the time they pushed through the cafe door, both were damp despite the umbrella's protection. 2 hot chocolates," Ms. Beatrice told the barista before Andre could protest. She guided him to a corner table away from the windows. "You're shivering, child." Andre hadn't noticed until she mentioned it. The shock was wearing off, leaving behind a cold anger and something else, a deep tiredness that seemed to settle in his bones. He'd called his grandmother, who was already on her way to pick him up, worry clear in her voice. "You don't have to stay with me," Andre said, though he was grateful for the company. "I'm sure you have places to be." Ms. Beatrice removed her rain hat, revealing a crown of silver-white hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Nowhere more important than right here," she said firmly. "What happened back there wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. That driver put his hands on you." The barista brought over their hot chocolates topped with whipped cream that Andre would have enjoyed under different circumstances. Now he just wrapped his hands around the warm mug, trying to stop their trembling. "Has anything like this happened to you before?" Ms. Beatrice asked, her eyes sharp and attentive. Andre hesitated. How could he explain the small indignities, the subtle shifts in atmosphere when he entered certain spaces, the way some people clutched their bags tighter, or how security guards seemed to materialize whenever he browsed in upscale stores? "Not exactly like this," he said finally. "Usually it's more quiet. People just treat you differently, but they don't say why." Ms. Beatrice nodded knowingly. "I'm 71 years old, young man. I've seen how the world works. What that bus driver did today, that wasn't subtle. That was hate, plain and simple." She pulled out her phone, an older model but well-maintained. "I want you to tell me exactly what happened from the beginning. I'm going to record it, if that's all right with you." Andre sipped his hot chocolate, considering. His debate coach had always stressed the importance of documentation, of having evidence to support your claims. "That's fine," he said, as Andre recounted the events, the malfunctioning bus pass, his offer to pay cash, Raymond's escalating hostility, and finally the push that sent him sprawling onto the wet sidewalk. Ms. Beatrice's expression grew increasingly troubled. When he finished, she stopped the recording and sat back. "You handled yourself well," she said. "Better than most grown folks would have." "It doesn't feel that way," Andre admitted. "I keep thinking maybe I should have done something different. Been more respectful or—" "Stop right there," Ms. Beatrice interrupted. "Don't you dare take responsibility for that man's actions. You were respectful. You were reasonable. He was the one who crossed a line." The cafe door opened, bringing with it a gust of rain-scented air and a young woman who looked around the small space before spotting them and hurrying over. "Excuse me," she said, slightly out of breath. "Are you the young man who was pushed off the number 42 bus about half an hour ago?" Andre tensed, immediately wary. "Who's asking?" "My name's Danny," she said, showing them her phone. "I was on that bus. I recorded what happened." On her screen was a video that started just as Raymond stood up from his driver's seat. Andre watched himself on the tiny screen, saw Raymond's hands connect with his chest, saw his own body falling backward down the steps. "I posted it online," Danny continued. "People need to see this stuff. It's already getting shared like crazy." She turned the phone so they could see the view count. Over 2,000 in less than an hour. Comments were pouring in, most expressing outrage. Andre felt a strange disconnection, as if he were watching something that had happened to someone else. "You posted that without asking me?" Danny had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I didn't get a chance to ask. You were on the ground and the bus pulled away. But isn't it good that people are seeing it? That driver needs to be held accountable." Before Andre could respond, the cafe door opened again. This time it was his grandmother, Patricia Wilson, her usually calm face tight with worry and something else, a fierce protectiveness that Andre had seen only a few times in his life. "Andre," she said, crossing to him in quick strides and immediately checking him over, her hands gentle on his face, his shoulders. "Are you hurt? Your wrist, is it broken?" "I don't think so, Grandma. Just sprained, maybe." Patricia turned to Ms. Beatrice and Danny. "Who are you? Were you there when this happened?" Ms. Beatrice introduced herself and explained how she'd witnessed the incident from the bus stop. Danny shifted uncomfortably under Patricia's scrutiny as she admitted to recording and posting the video. "Show me," Patricia demanded. As Patricia watched the video, her expression hardened. "I've been riding that route for 20 years, she said quietly. "I know most of the drivers. This one, I've heard things about him. Complaints from other riders." She looked at Andre. "We're going to the transit authority." Today. It's already blowing up online, Danny said, showing them the updated view count. Nearly 5,000 now. People are tagging the transit authority, the mayor's office, everyone. Andre felt overwhelmed. What had started as a simple ride home had somehow morphed into, what, a cause? A scandal? He wasn't sure he wanted any of it. He just wanted to go home to eat the dinner his grandmother had prepared, to finish his homework and go to bed. Grandma, he began, maybe we should just… No, Patricia said firmly. Not this time. How many times have we heard about these incidents? How many times have we shaken our heads and said, what a shame, and moved on? This happened to you, Andre, my grandson, and I have it on video. She nodded to Danny. Thank you for that, by the way. Danny looked relieved. Of course. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. Ms. Beatrice had been quietly watching this exchange. Now she cleared her throat. I volunteer at the community center 3 days a week. The director there, Mr. Chen, sits on the city's transit oversight committee. I think you should speak with him. Within the hour, they were seated in a small office at the community center. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a washed, clean feeling in the air. Mr. Chen, a serious man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, reviewed the video several times, his expression growing darker with each viewing. This is completely unacceptable, he said finally. Ms. Wilson, your grandson was assaulted by a city employee who was acting in an official capacity. There are clear protocols for handling malfunctioning payment systems, and physically removing a passenger, especially a minor, is absolutely not one of them. What happens now? Patricia asked. Mr. Chen tapped his pen against his desk. I'm going to make some calls. The transit authority needs to be notified immediately, and there should be an emergency meeting of the oversight committee. He looked at Andre. Would you be willing to make a statement? Officially? Andre glanced at his grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, he said. I'll tell them what happened. As they left the community center, Andre's phone buzzed continuously with notifications. Friends had seen the video, which had now been shared thousands of times. Local news stations were reaching out for comments. One of his debate teammates had started an online petition calling for Raymond's firing, which already had hundreds of signatures. This is getting big, Grandma, Andre said, showing her his phone. I don't know if I wanted all this. Patricia put her arm around his shoulders. Sometimes we don't choose our moments, Andre. Sometimes they choose us. Back at home after a much-delayed dinner, Andre sat on his bed scrolling through the comments on the video. Most were supportive, expressing outrage at Raymond's actions and praising Andre for his composure. But there were others, comments questioning why Andre hadn't complied, suggesting he must have done something to provoke the driver, using language that made his stomach clench. His phone rang, Ms. Beatrice checking in. How are you holding up? She asked. I don't know, Andre admitted. It's a lot. Some people online are saying I deserved it. There will always be those people, Ms. Beatrice said. But look at how many more are standing with you. Look at how many people saw that video and said, no, this is not acceptable in our community. After they hung up, Andre looked out his window at the night sky, now clear after the storm. Tomorrow there would be meetings and statements and probably more attention than he'd ever wanted. His wrist still ached and he had a history test he hadn't studied for. But something else was growing alongside the anxiety and uncertainty, a sense that maybe, just maybe, this moment could matter beyond just himself, that the anger he felt could be channeled into something productive, something that might prevent another kid from experiencing what he had today. His grandmother knocked softly on his door. You should get some rest, she said. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. Grandma, Andre said. Do you think anything will actually change because of this? Patricia sat beside him on the bed. I don't know, baby. But I know this, nothing changes if we stay silent. And thanks to Ms. Beatrice and that young woman with the phone, you don't have to be silent. You have proof. You have witnesses. That's more than most people get. She kissed his forehead, something she hadn't done since he was much younger. I'm proud of how you handled yourself today. Now get some sleep. As Andre finally drifted off to sleep, his phone continued to light up with notifications. Somewhere across town, Raymond, the bus driver, was also seeing the video for the first time, watching as his actions, played out in high definition, were being shared across the city and beyond. Neither of them could have predicted what would happen next. The next morning arrived with a brightness that seemed at odds with the storm from the day before. Andre woke to the smell of his grandmother's cooking and the continuous buzz of his phone on the nightstand. Overnight, the video had exploded across social media platforms. What had been thousands of views was now approaching 1 million. Local news stations had picked up the story, and notifications from reporters requesting interviews filled his inbox. Andre sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling through messages from friends and strangers alike. His debate team had created a hashtag that was trending locally, or Justice for Andre. Part of him felt uncomfortable with the attention, but another part recognized the importance of what was happening. This wasn't just about him anymore. His grandmother called from the kitchen, "Andre, breakfast is ready and you have visitors." Pulling on a clean t-shirt and jeans, Andre made his way to the kitchen, surprised to find Ms. Beatrice sitting at the table alongside Mr. Chen from the community center. Both looked like they'd been up most of the night. "Good morning," Andre said, suddenly self-conscious. "I didn't expect to see you so early." Mr. Chen looked up from his coffee. "Things are moving quickly. The transit authority called an emergency meeting for 10 o'clock this morning. They've already suspended the driver, Raymond Baker, pending investigation." Patricia set a plate of eggs and toast in front of Andre. "Eat," she said firmly. "We have a long day ahead." As Andre ate, Mr. Chen outlined what would happen at the meeting. Representatives from the transit authority, the mayor's office, and the city council would be present. Andre would be asked to give his account of what happened. "What about Raymond Baker?" Andre asked. "Will he be there?" "Yes," Mr. Chen replied. "He has the right to respond to the allegations. His union representative will also attend." Andre pushed his eggs around his plate, his appetite suddenly gone. The thought of facing the man who had pushed him off the bus made his stomach knot. Ms. Beatrice reached across the table and patted his hand. "You'll do fine. Just tell the truth exactly as it happened." "What if they don't believe me?" Andre asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since yesterday. "They have the video," his grandmother reminded him. "And Ms. Beatrice's statement. And the statements from other passengers that have been coming in all night." Mr. Chen nodded. "At least 7 other passengers have contacted the transit authority directly. Their accounts match yours perfectly." The community center had offered its largest meeting room for the gathering, as public interest had grown too large for the transit authority's usual conference space. When Andre arrived with his grandmother, Ms. Beatrice, and Mr. Chen, a crowd had already gathered outside. Some held handmade signs with slogans calling for justice and accountability. Local news vans lined the street, reporters doing live stand-ups for the morning broadcasts. "I didn't expect all this," Andre said quietly to his grandmother as they navigated through the crowd. "Word travels fast," she replied, "especially when it's something people have been waiting to address for a long time." Inside, the meeting room was arranged with a long table at the front where officials from various city departments sat shuffling papers and speaking in hushed tones. Rows of chairs faced them, already filling with community members and reporters. A separate table stood to one side, where Raymond Baker sat with a woman in a business suit, his union representative, Andre assumed. Raymond looked different in regular clothes, smaller somehow, less intimidating than he had seemed in his uniform. His eyes darted around the room nervously, refusing to land on Andre. The confident anger from yesterday seemed to have been replaced by something else, defiance mixed with fear. As Andre and his family were shown to seats in the front row, a hush fell over the room. People craned their necks to see him, some offering encouraging smiles or nods. Andre kept his eyes forward, trying to remember the breathing techniques his debate coach had taught him for staying calm under pressure. The transit authority director, a tall woman with short gray hair, called the meeting to order. She introduced herself as Director Powell and outlined the purpose of the gathering: to hear testimony regarding the incident involving driver Raymond Baker and passenger Andre Wilson, and to determine appropriate disciplinary action. "Before we begin," Director Powell said, "I want to acknowledge that this incident has touched a nerve in our community. We are committed to a fair and transparent process." She turned to Andre. "Mr. Wilson, we'd like to hear your account first if you're ready." Andre moved to the podium set up in front of the officials' table. The room was silent as he recounted the events of the previous day. his malfunctioning bus pass, his offer to pay cash, Raymond's escalating hostility, and finally, the push that sent him sprawling onto the wet sidewalk. As he spoke, Andre was surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. Yesterday's anger and humiliation were still there, but something else had joined them, a determination to make sure his story was heard clearly. When he finished, Director Powell thanked him and asked if any officials had questions. A council member wanted to know if Andre had interacted with Raymond Baker before. "No, sir," Andre replied. "I usually take that route 3 times a week, but different drivers are assigned. I'd never seen him before yesterday." Next, Ms. Beatrice gave her statement, describing what she had witnessed from the bus stop. Then Danny, the young woman who had recorded the video, was called forward. She played the recording for the room, though by now most people had already seen it online. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as Raymond Baker was called to respond. He walked to the podium slowly, his shoulders hunched defensively. "Mr. Baker," Director Powell said, "you've seen the video and heard the statements. Do you dispute any of the facts as presented?" Raymond cleared his throat. "The video doesn't show everything," he said, his voice gruff. "It doesn't show how he was holding up my route arguing about the rules." A murmur ran through the crowd. Andre felt his grandmother's hand tighten on his arm. "Even if that were true," Director Powell said, "Transit Authority policy explicitly prohibits physical contact with passengers except in cases of imminent danger." "Do you believe you were in danger from Mr. Wilson?" Raymond's face flushed. "Look, I've been driving that route for 15 years. I know troublemakers when I see them." He was being disrespectful. "That's not what I asked," Director Powell pressed. "Were you in any physical danger that would justify putting your hands on a passenger?" "No," Raymond admitted reluctantly, "but I was doing my job. Keeping to the schedule, enforcing the rules." "Your job description does not include pushing teenagers off buses," Mr. Chen interjected, his usually calm voice sharp with anger. Raymond's union representative leaned forward. "My client acknowledges that his actions were not in line with policy. However, we would like to note his 15 years of service with only 2 prior complaints, both of which were resolved without disciplinary action." Andre watched Raymond's face, trying to understand the man who had treated him with such unexpected hatred. There was no remorse there, no recognition of the harm he had caused, just defiance and a simmering anger that seemed to have nothing to do with Andre personally. Director Powell called for a brief recess while the officials conferred. As people milled about the room, a community activist approached Andre and his grandmother. "You're doing the right thing," she told them. "This isn't just about one incident. It's about a pattern that's been ignored for too long." When the meeting reconvened, Director Powell announced that Raymond Baker would remain on suspension while a full investigation was conducted. In the meantime, all transit employees would undergo mandatory refresher training on customer service policies and anti-discrimination protocols. "This is just bureaucratic nonsense," Raymond burst out suddenly, rising from his chair. "You're all making a big deal over nothing because you're afraid of these social media mobs." His union representative tried to quiet him, but Raymond shook off her hand. "I was doing my job," he insisted, looking directly at Andre for the first time. "And I'd do it again." The room erupted in angry shouts. Director Powell banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Andre sat perfectly still, meeting Raymond's gaze without flinching. "That's enough, Mr. Baker," Director Powell said firmly. "Your comments will be noted in the record." As the meeting concluded, reporters swarmed around Andre and his grandmother. Mr. Chen stepped in, announcing that Andre would give a brief statement but would not be taking questions. Andre hadn't prepared anything, but as he faced the cameras, the words came naturally. "What happened yesterday wasn't just about me," he said. "It's about making sure our public services are truly public, safe and accessible for everyone. I'm grateful for the community's support, and I trust that the Transit Authority will take appropriate action." As they left the community center, the crowd outside had grown even larger. People called out words of encouragement as Andre passed. His phone continued to buzz with notifications. The story had gone national now, with major news networks picking it up. "You handled that well," his grandmother said proudly as they drove home. "Your grandfather would have been proud." Andre looked out the window at the city passing by. The same streets he'd traveled countless times, now somehow different. Do you think anything will really change, Grandma? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Change never comes all at once, she said finally. It comes in moments like this when enough people say no more, when someone like you stands up and speaks the truth. Later that evening, as Andre worked on the homework he'd missed, a breaking news alert flashed on his phone. The transit authority had announced Raymond Baker's termination, effective immediately. Community leaders were praising the swift action while calling for broader reforms. Andre set down his phone, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. There was relief, yes, and a sense of justice being served, but there was also an unexpected emptiness. Something about Raymond's face at the meeting, the lack of understanding, the continued defiance bothered him. It wasn't enough for one person to lose their job if the underlying problems remained unaddressed. His grandmother found him sitting on the porch steps, staring at the evening sky. "You saw the news?" she asked, sitting beside him. Andre nodded. "It doesn't feel like it's over." "It's not," she agreed. "But it's a beginning." Neither of them could have known how true those words would prove to be, or how the story would take an unexpected turn that would challenge everything they thought they understood about that rainy afternoon at the bus stop. 3 days after the transit authority meeting, life had begun to settle into a strange new normal for Andre. His story remained in the news, but the initial frenzy had calmed somewhat. He had returned to school, where his teachers offered understanding about his missed assignments and his classmates treated him with a mix of curiosity and newfound respect. His debate coach had even suggested that Andre might want to consider a topic related to public transportation policy for the upcoming regional tournament. At home, Andre's grandmother had fielded dozens of calls from relatives near and far, all expressing outrage and support. Their modest house had seen a steady stream of visitors bringing food and solidarity. Throughout it all, Patricia had maintained a calm presence, shielding Andre from as much of the chaos as possible, while encouraging him to process his feelings about what had happened. "You don't have to be perfect about this," she told him over breakfast. "You're allowed to be angry, to be tired, to wish it had never happened." Andre pushed his cereal around in the bowl. "I am tired," he admitted. "But I keep thinking about what Mr. Chen said about how this could lead to real changes in training and policies." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "That's the hope. But that's not your responsibility to carry alone." Andre was about to respond when his phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Chen. "Need to speak with you and your grandmother. Important development. Can I stop by after school today?" The message left Andre unsettled for the rest of the day. What new development could there be? Raymond had been fired. The transit authority had announced a review of their policies, and several community organizations had launched initiatives to address discrimination in public services. It seemed like things were moving in the right direction, if slowly. When Andre arrived home from school, Mr. Chen's car was already parked outside. Inside, he found Mr. Chen and his grandmother seated at the kitchen table, their expressions serious. Ms. Beatrice was there too, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "What's going on?" Andre asked, setting down his backpack. Mr. Chen gestured for Andre to join them. "There's been a development in the investigation," he said. "Something that wasn't public knowledge during the hearing." Andre sat down, suddenly tense. "What is it?" Mr. Chen exchanged glances with Patricia, who nodded for him to continue. "The transit authority has been reviewing Raymond Baker's personnel records and medical information," he explained. "It turns out that 6 months ago Raymond was diagnosed with a brain tumor." The kitchen fell silent. Andre struggled to process this information. "A brain tumor?" he repeated. "Yes," Mr. Chen continued. "It's located in an area of the brain that can affect behavior, impulse control, and emotional regulation. His doctors had noted potential personality changes as a symptom, but it seems Raymond didn't disclose the full extent of his condition to his employers." "Why are we just learning about this now?" Patricia asked, her voice tight with confusion. "Medical privacy laws," Mr. Chen explained. "The transit authority couldn't access his medical records without permission. But after his termination, Raymond's family came forward with the information. They're claiming that his actions were influenced by his medical condition and that he should receive treatment rather than punishment." Andre stared at the grain of the wooden table, tracing a finger along its pattern. "Sokanem, what does this mean?" "For the case, I mean." "That's complicated," Mr. Chen admitted. "Legally speaking, The transit authority was within its rights to terminate him based on his actions regardless of the cause. But this new information raises questions about accountability and compassion. Ms. Beatrice, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. It doesn't erase what he did to you, Andre. An explanation isn't the same as an excuse. Andre nodded, but his mind was racing. He remembered Raymond's face at the hearing. The anger, the defiance, but also something else he couldn't place at the time. Had there been confusion there too? Fear, is he going to be okay? Andre asked suddenly. The tumor, is it treatable? The three adults exchanged glances, seemingly surprised by his question. His family says it's operable, Mr. Chen said, but they're struggling with the medical costs, especially now that he's lost his job and health insurance. Patricia reached out and squeezed Andre's hand. This doesn't change what happened to you, she said gently. You don't have to feel responsible for his situation. I know, Andre said. But it changes things, doesn't it? If he was sick, if he couldn't control his behavior because of a tumor, that's different from him just hating me for no reason. The conversation was interrupted by Andre's phone buzzing repeatedly. He glanced at it to see notifications flooding in. News alerts, social media mentions, text messages from friends. It's gone public, Mr. Chen said grimly. Someone leaked the information about Raymond's condition. Within the hour, the story had taken on a new dimension. The local news was running segments with medical experts explaining how brain tumors could affect behavior. Social media was divided, with some people expressing sympathy for Raymond while others insisted his medical condition didn't excuse his actions. Andre scrolled through the comments on the original video, now filled with heated debates about accountability versus compassion. Some people were even criticizing Andre and his family, suggesting they had pushed for Raymond's firing without knowing the full story. This isn't fair, Patricia said, looking over Andre's shoulder at his phone. None of us knew about his condition. Would it have made a difference if we had? Andre asked quietly. His grandmother didn't answer immediately. I don't know, she admitted finally. I'd like to think we would have shown compassion. But what he did was still wrong. Tumor or no tumor. Later that evening, Andre sat on the porch swing trying to sort through his tangled feelings. The initial clarity of the situation, the straightforward narrative of discrimination and injustice, had become clouded. He wasn't sure what to feel anymore. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway drew his attention. It was Danny, the young woman who had recorded the video. She hadn't been around since the hearing. Hey, she said, approaching the porch hesitantly. I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I wanted to see how you're doing with everything. Andre moved over on the swing to make room for her. It's complicated, he said. Danny nodded. The news about his tumor, it changes the story, doesn't it? That's what I've been thinking about, Andre said. When it was just about discrimination, it was easier to be angry. Now I don't know what to feel. I've been thinking about taking down the video, Danny admitted. But then again, what happened to you was real, regardless of why it happened. And the conversation it started is important. They sat in silence for a while, watching as the streetlights came on one by one. Have you heard anything else about him? Andre asked finally. About Raymond? Danny hesitated. Just rumors. That his family is struggling to pay for his treatment. That he's been getting death threats even after the news about his tumor came out. Andre winced. That wasn't what he wanted. For another person to suffer. Especially someone who might have been influenced by a medical condition beyond their control. The next morning, Andre woke up with a clearer sense of what he needed to do. At breakfast, he outlined his thoughts to his grandmother. I want to talk to Raymond, he said, face to face. Not at a hearing with cameras and officials, but just person to person. Patricia looked concerned. Are you sure that's a good idea? After everything that happened? I'm not sure of anything, Andre admitted. But I keep thinking about what you've always told me, that understanding is the beginning of healing. I can't make sense of any of this without at least trying to understand him better. His grandmother studied him for a long moment. You've always had a wise heart, she said finally. If this is what you feel you need to do, I'll support you. But you're not going alone. Through Mr. Chen, they arranged a meeting at the community center. Raymond had initially been reluctant, his family suspicious of Andre's motives, but eventually agreed. The meeting would be private, no press. No officials, just Andre and his grandmother. Raymond and his wife and Mr. Chen as a neutral facilitator. As Andre entered the small conference room where the meeting would take place, his heart hammered in his chest. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say, but now all those careful words seemed to evaporate. Raymond looked different than he had at the hearing, thinner, more subdued. A woman who must be his wife sat beside him, her hand protectively on his arm. The anger that had radiated from him before seemed to have been replaced by exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," Mr. Chen said, breaking the awkward silence. "I think everyone here wants the same thing, to find a way forward that acknowledges the harm that was done while recognizing the complicated circumstances." Raymond's wife spoke first. "We want you to know that Raymond is not a violent man," she said, her voice strained. "The doctors have explained that the tumor is pressing on areas of his brain that control impulses, that affect judgment. The man on that video, that's not who he's been for the 30 years I've known him." Andre nodded, trying to reconcile this information with what he had experienced. "I appreciate you telling me that," he said carefully. "I came here because I wanted to understand better. And because," he paused, gathering his courage, "because I think there might be a way to address what happened that doesn't just focus on punishment." For the first time, Raymond looked directly at Andre. "Why would you want to help me?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "After what I did?" Andre considered the question seriously. "Because hurting you doesn't undo what happened to me," he said finally. "And because if your actions were caused by a medical condition, then maybe the right response isn't just anger, but compassion." As the four of them continued to talk, a fragile understanding began to take shape. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the beginning of something that might eventually heal the harm that had been done. Outside the community center, reporters had somehow gotten wind of the meeting. They waited with cameras and microphones, eager for the next development in a story that had captured the public's imagination. But inside, something more important was happening, a conversation that would lead to an unexpected solution. No one could have predicted. The news of Andre's private meeting with Raymond spread quickly through the community. Some praised Andre's compassion, calling him wise beyond his years. Others criticized what they saw as letting Raymond off the hook too easily. Through it all, Andre kept his focus on what felt right to him, not what others expected. A week after their first conversation at the community center, Andre sat with his grandmother at their kitchen table, surrounded by notes and a laptop. Mr. Chen had connected them with a community organizer who specialized in restorative justice approaches. Together, they were drafting a proposal for the transit authority. "Do you think they'll actually consider this?" Andre asked, reviewing the document they'd spent hours crafting. Patricia looked up from her reading glasses. "They'd be foolish not to. This offers them a way forward that addresses everyone's concerns." The proposal was innovative but practical. Raymond would receive a 6-month suspension rather than permanent termination, allowing him to retain his health insurance while undergoing treatment for his tumor. In exchange, he would participate in the development of a comprehensive anti-bias training program for all transit employees, sharing his experience as a cautionary tale. The Transit Authority would also establish a community oversight committee to review complaints of discrimination and recommend policy changes. "It's not perfect," Andre acknowledged, "but it feels more right than just firing him and moving on." His grandmother squeezed his shoulder. "Perfect solutions are rare in an imperfect world. What matters is that you're trying to create something healing out of something harmful." The next day, Andre, his grandmother, and Mr. Chen presented their proposal to Director Powell and the Transit Authority Board. The meeting was closed to the press at Andre's request, creating a space for honest conversation without the pressure of public scrutiny. "This is unexpected," Director Powell said after reviewing the document. "Most people in your position would be pushing for the harshest possible consequences." "I'm not most people," Andre replied simply. "And this isn't a typical situation. Raymond's actions were wrong, but they may have been influenced by his medical condition. Punishing him without addressing the larger issues won't prevent this from happening to someone else." One board member leaned forward, clearly skeptical. "You're very forgiving for someone who was physically assaulted." Andre considered this. "It's not really about forgiveness," he said carefully. It's about finding a solution that actually fixes things instead of just making us feel better for a moment. After 2 hours of discussion, revisions, and occasional heated debate, the board agreed to implement a modified version of the proposal. They would reinstate Raymond on probationary status after his medical treatment, pending medical clearance. The anti-bias training program would be developed with input from community organizations, and the oversight committee would include representation from diverse rider groups. Outside the Transit Authority building, Andre's phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Beatrice. "How did it go?" He smiled as he typed back, "They said yes." That evening, Andre's story made the local news again, but with a different angle this time. The headlines focused on the innovative resolution rather than the conflict. Teen pushes for restorative approach after bus incident, and community solution emerges from transit controversy. Raymond's wife called Patricia that night, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank your grandson," she said. "Raymond has his first surgery scheduled next week. Without the insurance, I don't know what we would have done." Patricia relayed the message to Andre as they sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies begin to appear in the early evening darkness. "You've changed their lives," she said quietly. Andre shook his head. "I just did what felt right. Anyone would have done the same if they knew the whole story." "No," his grandmother said firmly. "Not anyone. Most people would have stayed angry, would have wanted punishment without asking deeper questions. You did something much harder. You looked for understanding even when you had every right to be furious." 2 months later, Andre stood at a podium in the community center, addressing a room full of transit employees. This was the first session of the new mandatory training program, and Andre had been asked to share his experience. "What happened to me that rainy afternoon wasn't just about one driver and one passenger," he told the attentive crowd. "It was about systems that don't always work for everyone, about assumptions we make about each other without knowing the full story, and about how quickly things can go wrong when we forget to see each other's humanity." In the back of the room, Raymond sat with his wife. His surgery had been successful, though he would need ongoing monitoring. The changes in his behavior since the tumor's removal had been dramatic, the unpredictable anger replaced by a quieter, more thoughtful demeanor. He still had no clear memory of pushing Andre off the bus, a fact that troubled him deeply. After the training session, Raymond approached Andre hesitantly. "That was a good talk," he said. "You have a way with words." "Debate team," Andre explained with a small smile. "You learn how to make a case." An awkward silence fell between them, not hostile, but heavy with the weight of their shared history. "I keep trying to understand what happened that day," Raymond said finally. "The doctors say the tumor affected my impulse control, my emotions. But that doesn't make it any easier to accept what I did." Andre nodded. "I know. I've been trying to understand it too." "I don't expect you to forgive me," Raymond continued, "but I want you to know I'm committed to making sure nothing like this happens again. Not just because of the agreement, but because it's the right thing to do." As spring turned to summer, the changes initiated by what people now called the bus incident began to take root. The Transit Authority's new Community Oversight Committee had already reviewed dozens of complaints and recommended several policy changes. Rider satisfaction scores were improving, particularly among minority communities. The training program, now being led by a professional diversity consultant with input from both Andre and Raymond, was being considered for adoption by neighboring city transit systems. On a warm June evening, Andre sat in the audience at the city council meeting, watching as Mr. Chen presented data on the program's initial success. Ms. Beatrice sat beside him, proudly patting his hand when the council members specifically commended Andre's role in the initiative. "The remarkable thing about this program," the council chair noted, "is that it emerged not from consultants or experts, but from a high school student who chose compassion over retribution. Sometimes our youngest community members have the most to teach us." After the meeting, a local reporter approached Andre. "You've become something of a local hero," she observed. "How does that feel?" Andre considered the question seriously. "It feels like a responsibility," he said finally. "People are listening to me in a way they weren't before. I want to make sure I'm saying something worth hearing." The reporter's next question caught him off guard. "And what about your relationship with Raymond Baker?" Some people find it hard to understand how you can work alongside the man who assaulted you. Andre glanced across the room, where Raymond was talking with Director Powell about upcoming training sessions. "We're not friends," he said honestly, "but we're both committed to making things better. Sometimes that's more important than how you feel about someone personally." On the first anniversary of the incident, Andre stood at a different bus stop, waiting for the number 42 route. He was headed to the community center to help Ms. Beatrice with a youth leadership program he'd helped establish, inspired by his own experience. When the bus pulled up, the doors opened to reveal a driver Andre recognized from the training sessions. "Hey there, Andre," she said with a smile. "Good to see you." As Andre found a seat, he noticed a new sign prominently displayed at the front of the bus. "All riders welcome. Report concerns to Community Oversight Committee." Below the text was a QR code linking to a reporting system Andre had helped design. Looking out the window as the city rolled by, Andre reflected on the unexpected journey of the past year. What had begun as a moment of injustice had transformed into something none of them could have predicted, a catalyst for real change, not just in policies but in people. His phone buzzed with a text from his grandmother. "Proud of you, always." Andre smiled and typed back, "Just trying to make the ride better for everyone." As the bus continued along its route, picking up and dropping off passengers of all backgrounds, Andre noticed something that would have seemed impossible a year ago. People were talking to each other, making space for each other, seeing each other. Small changes perhaps, but real ones. Sometimes transformation begins not with grand gestures, but with simple recognition of our shared humanity, even, or perhaps especially in the moments when that humanity seems most fragile. For Andre, for Raymond, and for their community, that recognition had turned an ending into a beginning, a moment of division into a path toward healing.